This is our third town hall study session given by the two police chiefs, Southfield Police Chief Elvin Barren and Farmington Hills Police Chief Jeff King. We are very honored to have the Oak Park Public Safety Director Steve Cooper and our Detroit Police Chief James White. Now, we also have some information tables over there that we would love for you to walk past and see what information they're giving out, because all of this is really good stuff. My name is PG, and I thank the two police chiefs for entrusting me to put these town hall study sessions together. I would like to welcome our Southfield mayor, and I saw him moving around somewhere. Dr. Kenson Cyber, would you please come up here and give a real welcome? And it's okay to clap. We love our mayor.
Well, thank you and good evening. And to the chiefs, we appreciate your spending time with the community. Very much, and thank you all for being here. I particularly want to thank the lady behind me, known to most as PG, as she has worked tirelessly on this, getting the publicity together, organizing it, promoting it. So we thank you, Pam, for all of your work. So I just want to make a few reflections here. Immediately following Chief Elvin Barren's arrival in Southfield, he held a forum at the Southfield Library, and he outlined initiatives for the department, how he was going to shape the department. And among those initiatives was addressing domestic violence. It was very high on his list. And he has followed up on that. We've had the series of domestic violence awareness walks, as well as working with the collaboration between the various groups that actually are listed on the back of your program. So unfortunately, domestic violence is a societal problem that sadly Southfield is not immune from. In fact, it is the #1 crime in our city. It happens virtually every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And this makes me wonder, why haven't we learned that violence, whether it's physical or emotional, never ends well? Why doesn't our society learn this? We certainly have examples in history from Mahatma Gandhi to Martin Luther King of the importance of nonviolence. So I have some random observations on this subject. Domestic violence is rooted in the need to control, personal insecurities, and jealousy. To me, jealousy is is a very dangerous and very useless emotion. It doesn't change a situation, especially in terms of personal relationships. Instead, it tends to fuel bad behavior, sometimes with very serious and life-altering consequences, like what we've seen all too often, where the perpetrator says, if I can't have him or her, then no one can. And how many deaths have been how many people have died in this sad scenario, and it's happened in this city. Control may afford one short-term gain, but it usually leads to resentment and rebellion. It rarely leads to lasting change, as we have seen throughout history of the human race. Humans never seem to learn this. How many wars have been started over the need to control? In relationships, it leads to toxicity. Close to home, I'll relate a story of one of my nieces. She fell for a guy when she was very young, who was insecure and was constantly thinking that she was cheating on him or looking at other men, and he wanted to have her conform and control everything to his way of looking at things. And I would ask her why she was still with him. And she said, "Oh, I love him." This toxicity went on for years. I hear you. And she began defying him and let it be known that she'd had enough. And finally, she started taking better care of herself, really realizing that she had lost control, and he went into rages. His final act of control was to take one of her dining room chairs to the garage, tie a rope around a rafter, and put a noose around his neck. He hung himself just as he knew that she would be arriving home, and hit the garage door opener. It was his final FU. My niece, to her great credit, didn't give in to this selfish act. She called the police, cut the rope, and put the dining room chair back where it belonged. You can applaud that. You know, it takes a lot to get out of these toxic relationships. I grew up as a middle child with 4 sisters, 2 younger, 2 older. As siblings do, we got into our scrapes. And one of the things that my father drilled into me is you never hit a woman. Whatever happened to that? I don't know. Last May, one of my favorite performers and extremely talented singer died, Miss Tina Turner. The documentaries, you've all seen the documentaries of her life story, I'm sure. And here, her story is an example of a partner consumed with control issues, with insecurities, his insecurities, and jealousy. Clearly, Tina was the greater talent. Rather than celebrate, support, and encourage her talent, he did the opposite. Once free of him, she went on to greater heights than ever before. It came to a point that she'd had enough. She had an awakening and finally had the courage to break the bonds. I mentioned Tina Turner's story because it's glaringly illustrative of domestic violence and points to the reality that domestic violence occurs to everyday people and superstars. So it is my hope that through this series we encourage more women and men who are trapped in a cycle of domestic violence to break free. Real love does not include emotional and physical violence. Once again, I want to thank the Chiefs and PG for continuing to place a spotlight on this societal problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now I would like to introduce our very own Southfield Police Chief, Elvin Barren, to give some opening remarks.
Certainly want to thank Pam as well, PG as well, for putting this together. A lot of effort went into this, so give her a round of applause. Secondly, I know that police chiefs that sit with me in very busy schedules, but they thought enough of this event to attend. Give them a round of applause. And also our panelists here. And you're going to hear a lot of great information coming from these panelists. Give them a round of applause. And the man who needs no introduction, Mr. Charlie Langton, thank you. Give him a round of applause. So as you all know, this is a very, very important topic. It's something that is affecting not only locally but nationally domestic violence incidents. 12 million people a year are victimized by intimate partner violence. And today we're going to discuss what we can do as a community to bring this to an end. So thank you.
And now I would like to introduce my other chief, who is the collaborating partner with Chief Elvin Barren, my Farmington Hills Police Chief, Jeff King. And you can clap. It's okay to clap.
Thank you, PG. Thank you all for coming out. We want to start off, a great event like this but with a lot of pleasantries and welcomes, but why are we here? What's next? And we talk about that, and I speak for the Farmington Hills Police Department, but the great agencies here, Detroit, Southfield, Oak Park, what we are doing as law enforcement on the next evolution and what we can do next to work with our communities and provide those resources, and that's what this is all about. Because domestic violence is a crime that is unique in the sense that it really flourishes in secrecy and isolation. And that cycle of domestic violence just repeats over and over and over again. And as law enforcement officers, we see it day in and day out. We see it all the time. And it's how do we break that cycle? How do we get the individuals that are surviving and victims of this out of that cycle? And that's where the law enforcement agencies here are outstanding in responding, investigating, making the arrests, but supporting the victims that include the children, the loved ones of that individual. How do we do that better? How do we do that the next step? What's next? And that's why we're here. That's why you're here. We want to thank you for that. And we are interested in hearing what you have to say for us to make our agencies, our men and women that are out there serving the community, responding to these incidents, and supporting those victims and survivors. What can we do next? What's the next step we can take? Thank you.
Now, this man needs no introduction. If you watch Fox 2 News, you see him in the mornings. Who has that much energy to bring to your TV screen other than Mr. GQ himself, Charlie Langton? So he is the moderator. He needs no introduction. People watch the news just to see what you're wearing. And isn't it great minds think alike because we have on the same color?
We're thinking about burgundy wine, I thought, really. That's what we're talking about.
Really good, really good. So without further ado, let me turn this program over to Mr. Charlie Langton, Fox 2 News legal analyst.
Thank you, PG. Oh, look out. Thank you. So I would like to, hello there. I would like to have you ask questions. Whenever you have a question, just raise your hand. Because really this is for you. But, and as we go on, if you have a question, and, just whatever. There's no bad question. Chief Cooper, Oak Park Police. What is domestic violence?
When you talk about domestic violence, it's a crime. It's violence committed against a spouse of an intimate partner, someone who actually cohabitates with the person. Could be a current spouse, an ex-spouse.
Chief, I had a fight with my wife. We yelled at each other. I smashed something down. I was upset. I'm sorry. Is that domestic violence?
I'm sorry, the first part you said you smashed something down. Did you hear?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, you're a victim of, you're an offender of domestic violence.
If she called the police, and I'll use me as an example, but maybe you've heard this before. If she called the police on me, what would you do?
We would, obviously our first thing, we would have officers respond to the scene. We would separate the two of you, then we would interview you both to actually find out what the particulars were of the...
We had a fight.
Yeah.
And I threw something against the wall. Chief White, would you arrest me?
More than likely. We would have to investigate. We would have to find out what happened. You threw something against the wall. Did you do it in an intimidating manner? Absolutely, you would be arrested.
Where would you take me?
DDC, Detroit Detention Center.
How long would I be there?
At minimum, you would be there 48 hours, but you could be transported to Wayne County Jail if we got a warrant for your arrest, and if in fact we were able to prove that you participated in domestic violence. The act of intimidation is domestic violence. threats against safety is also domestic violence. It's also how you are conducting yourself to that victim.
Chief Barren, I didn't hit her. Does it matter? You agree with Chief White and Chief Cooper?
Absolutely. You got to remember, domestic violence comes in many different forms: physical abuse, verbal abuse, isolation.
But Chief King, my spouse said, you know what? We can make up. Don't take him to jail. Don't put him in the detention center in Detroit. I'll never get out. I just wanted you to teach him a lesson. Is that good?
We don't teach lessons. We protect people's lives. We would take proper enforcement action. And most importantly, we would have that communication with that victim. That victim may not even realize the aspects that they are suffering through at the hands of this abuser. And we would take the appropriate action to not only arrest that individual, but we would support that victim and what he or she needs moving forward.
So that is I want to quantify the domestic violence. It was a fight, no physical, but that's still domestic violence. Let me bring in Dr. Christina Bisuedo. She's a plastic surgeon. She also knows the psychological effects of scars. Can you tell me the most serious example of a domestic violence that you've seen in your medical practice?
Sure. Probably the most severe act of domestic violence is a patient that had acid burns. She had acid thrown on her. And it's
Acid burns? What is acid burn?
Yeah, so chemical being spilled and having physical, scarring that is there for life. And, we can do things to try to help it. But it's something you're going to see forever. And it's a constant reminder. And there's functional, in addition to all the emotional, mental, psychological, there's functional issues that go with that too.
A little bit closer there. When I go to the doctor, an ambulance may be called. Now, again, I went from maybe a mild example to now a very severe example. You're in the emergency room. Do you ask the patient, where did you get those acid burns?
I think as surgeons and any physician, seeing a patient with an injury, you should ask everybody routinely. And
What do you say to them?
It's part of,
A little bit louder, a little bit louder. What do you say to them? Where'd you get, beside the obvious, where do you get those burns? And do they tell you? Yes, it's from my spouse.
They don't always disclose it. They a lot of times will make excuses or have, another reason why they don't always disclose. And there may be, it's a complicated thing as to why they may not disclose it, but.
But you as the doctor, you got to treat them right there in the emergency room. You've been in the ER.
Yeah,
You suspect domestic violence, don't you?
correct.
What do you do then?
I might say, I've seen a patient like this before, and they were in a violent relationship, and I've seen other things like this that, are you sure that there's nobody that has been hurting you? Do you feel safe going home? Do you have a safe place to go? Asking those sort of questions.
You're going to admit them to the hospital if it's severe enough. Do you call Chief White or do you call Chief Cooper?
We do get social work involved and get the appropriate authorities involved right away, yeah.
Suppose they lie. I spilled something, but you still suspect it. What do you do?
Well, if the patient's under 18, they would be considered a minor, and then you would be obligated to report it to CPS if they're an adult. You just have to try and see if you can get their trust, because I think sometimes it's a hard situation, and see if you can get them some resources to get them help.
Aliza.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Aliza Klein.
Yep.
You are a social worker.
Correct. Licensed clinical social worker for Jewish Family Service.
You counsel people.
Correct.
Do you? Now, by the time they get to you, they've already. Have they come to the grip sometimes that my spouse might be an abuser?
Not necessarily. sometimes they're just in a stage of denial, and we want to get them to that enlightenment stage, right, where they understand and recognize that they are in a domestic violence relationship. Because a lot of times they may not even know. They don't even know what that looks like. And it is my job to listen without judgment and validate, how they're feeling. But a lot of times some of them don't know and some of them do. It just depends on what stage you're in.
Why don't people tell a doctor or a counselor like you, social worker, or a doctor, or a police chief that they are in a bad relationship, or my spouse did that? Why don't they just say it?
So a lot of times it can be based on just feeling maybe embarrassed, or that they don't necessarily want to out their spouse, that maybe they want to protect their children, they want to protect the safety of their children as well. They want to make sure that they, have some place to go at the end of the day. There are so many different reasons. I mean, we can discuss it all night. There are many reasons.
Chief White, why do you think people are reluctant to say, yes, my spouse hit me, or threw something at me, or burned me, or whatever?
Well, I think it's a number of reasons. I think some have already been talked about, but this crosses all socioeconomic lines, right? This is doctors, this is police officers, this is everybody, and there's a high level of embarrassment, unfortunately, and that's part of the track that the abuser relies on. They know that you're going to be embarrassed. They try to overpower you with this notion that you will lose credibility in the community if you share what's happening with you. We had a murder-suicide in our department, 2 police officers dating, and we later found out, sadly, that the female victim was, in a long-term abusive relationship and didn't have the resources to go and report it. And she's in the police department. So imagine, and at least in her perspective, she didn't want to be embarrassed. She didn't want to share the information. So imagine if you're a doctor, or a school teacher, a work counselor, it could happen, and it does happen.
Yeah, the statistics are alarming. The women are the most likely targets, 18 to 24, and then up to 35. And so it is predominantly females are the most victimized in this crime.
What about men? Is it Marcus Giuliani? Are you okay? Can you talk here? You are, I know you don't like to use the word victim, you are a survivor.
Correct.
Of domestic violence.
That's correct.
How long have you been a survivor?
Most recently I'm going through it right now.
This moment?
Yeah.
How long has this been going on?
With their mom, about 2 years. So, and...
Did you, can you tell us what happened?
It started very slowly, she was very friendly, and then
What did she do?
She just started, criticizing me, and she just started putting me down, and then it grew and grew, sometimes for 2 hours, sometimes for 3 hours. Sometimes I was trying to go to sleep, and she would not let me sleep. More recently, this year, she started having an affair with a trainer at Lifetime Fitness. I can't out his name. And then she filed for divorce, and she said that I was abusing her.
Did you ever call the police?
I called them numerous times in Canton. Yeah.
And what happened?
She's very good. She said that I was a typical Middle Eastern man, that I didn't like women, that I was abusive towards her, and that she was, she looks very white. She's mixed race, and she said that she was just a poor innocent woman, and that I was being abusive towards her.
Sarah Graves, and again, I know the counselors are looking at me but he's okay. He said he would talk. All right, so we don't want to embarrass anybody. But this is a typical story. Sarah Graves, a social worker. You've heard a story like that. What's the first step what would you ask him if he came to you and he said, this is what happened? You just heard it.
first you really need to assess somebody's safety when they're going through a situation like this, because being a man, you're not going to be looked at as necessarily somebody that would be an obvious victim of any type of domestic violence. People forget that one of the largest forms of domestic violence is emotional abuse. And so it's about conditioning somebody, training them to feel like they are at this lowest point. So when anyone comes to us, the first step is to safety plan with them, is to find out how safe they feel living in their home environment.
Just ask them.
Yeah, I mean, how safe are you in your home environment?
I basically fled about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and it was very interesting because I was here at the walk, and I showed him some videos of my wife. By then, I'd already been to the ER twice. She had thrown me down. I'd hit my head. I had MRI scans. I'd hit my back. I had contusions on my leg. This was one time while I was holding her, and I was trying to protect her. She came and she choked me. I was literally just holding her just like this. I was trying to put her to sleep. And it was bedtime, and she came in and just created a ruckus, and then she started choking me, and I left and I went into the other room, and then she came in there, and I have it recorded, other than the end where she grabbed my phone, but so it really escalated, and she's on some kind of I don't know. I can't stop.
Thank you for being honest. Wow. This is very important. Thank you. But the police came and they didn't do anything to her?
No, the first time I fled for my life because she took my phone, and I was lying on the ground going, help, help, somebody help me. And then she called the police on me, and she said that I was being, whatever, and they said, give the phone back. So they gave me my phone back, and I just ran out of there when I got in my car and I left. And I ended up to my friend's house, and he took me to the ER. And then the police came to the ER, and the police came ready to arrest me. I was sitting in the hospital ER in the gown, getting an MRI scan, and they were like, oh, she had told him that I threw myself down.
Sarah Graves, what are you thinking right now?
My first thoughts are always obviously you did the best thing that you could for yourself. You protected your children. You were fleeing a very difficult situation. So the most important part was that you got to safety. Validating what happened to you is very important so that you aren't left feeling like more of a victim. Because when people don't accept someone's story and hear what they've been through, we're victimizing him all over again by judging him, by saying, you're a man, you should have been able to handle your wife, she shouldn't have been able to overtake you, you could take care of yourself. He's feeling that pain all over again. So we work with people in situations like this to help, number one, safety, developing a plan and goals for you, how are you gonna make life happen now? What is it that you want it to look like, differences? But the biggest thing is to never make you feel like what you've been through is not huge. And the fact that you took the time, you knew what you needed to do to protect yourself and your children, and you need to be applauded for that, for sure.
Thank you.
Aliza, you've heard the story as well. What kind of counseling would Walkers need?
So before we get into that, I just want to say something, and it really stood out to me is that as you were talking, we talk about when domestic violence happens and what it looks like, right? And I just want to make this clear that domestic violence does not have a look, right? And that's something that is overlooked a lot, that that the person that is the abuser is an angry person, is someone that is hitting a wall and so on and so forth, but it's not always like that. They could be charming, right? They could be the person that gives charity. They can be the person next door that is, helping your mom with their groceries. And so we have to change that narrative that domestic violence has this angry look and that it can be, it can look like many different forms. So that's just something that came to mind I just wanted to touch on.
What questions are you having right now when you're presented with a situation like this?
So again, as Sarah has said, we're talking about safety, right? That's our first number one goal. Our second is that we want to get you resources, continuous resources to have, so that you can have support moving forward, right? So for within your children, within, just within yourself. And so going back to the counseling, what I'm doing is that I am working with the survivors and trying to empower them and trying to help them day to day, making sure that they know that they have, that they're safe, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about safety as well. But then also knowing that they can move on, move forward, and they can start a new life.
Margaret Hall, you are also a survivor.
Correct.
Can you tell us when were you, what happened in your situation?
I'll give you the crib notes version of it. 18 years I was married, and I thought I could fix it.
So you were you were in an abusive relationship for 18 years?
Married, yes. Because sometimes when you're married or any relationship, we as women think we're fixers. We're natural nurturers. We want to make everything okay. You put the fact that you have a religious background, that you took vows, and then you're conditioned. So that's something that happens more times than people talk about.
So does that mean you don't say anything to anybody? Say in the first year, you had an idea you were a victim.
No, it wasn't the first year. It was after I lost my second child that was caused by the domestic violence. And then immediately after that, I got pregnant, so I knew I wasn't going to get divorced. So I tried to work on my marriage, counseling, prayer, until one day it started to get physical. I called the police, and I said, I'm not doing this anymore, because I didn't want to be a headline.
Was it hard? How hard was it to make that call, to call the police on your husband?
Once the phone he picked up hit the wall, it wasn't hard at all. Because I knew where it could go from there, because it already had been brewing. I had 2 boys, young, and I didn't want to make it a cycle of continuation. So I said it has to stop with me, regardless of how hard it is. So I lost everything, but I rebuilt my life. And I have my life, and they're alive.
Chief King, what do you say to someone that you just picked up for domestic violence? You know they're going to be in the lockup. Do you counsel that person at all, or do you get them to talk, or do they understand what they're doing? Are they combative? All the above? What happens?
A person responsible for committing domestic violence, you're talking about the suspect, the perpetrator.
Suspect. Like Margaret's husband.
Everyone we arrest in Farmington Hills would be discussed with a detective. The case would be discussed with a detective. They would be brought, the preliminary investigation on the scene. Officers would talk and try to get to the bottom of everything.
Do they say they know what they did?
Some do, some fight with us. It's all the above to your question. It's all the above. But yes, we talk to them. We provide not only counseling opportunities to the suspects. They rarely take them, but sometimes they do. But it's more about the victims and getting those victims the resources that they have. But it goes both ways. But yes, the focus is on the victims.
Margaret, did you want your husband to go to jail?
Yes.
There's no hesitation there. Do you want your wife to go to jail?
At this point, probably yes. It's just been very difficult because, we have kids and I just think about them. It's really hard. It's really hard. So.
What about, let me get a counselor here, okay? You've had people that have gone through the courts, they violate the bond, it's a misdemeanor, she slaps 30 days on them, they get out, what do? They go back. Now the woman, you'll say hypothetical, okay? They come to you. I am so afraid. What can I do?
So right then we talk about safety planning, right? So we go back to safety planning, but at the same time, I have to validate where they are, where at the stage that they're at, right? It takes someone 7 times to leave.
How many times?
7 times
To leave.
to leave
Why is that?
a relationship. Because we don't know why they want to stay, right? There's so
Margaret,
many
how long?
different,
It took
there's
you
so many
18
different
years.
reasons. There's, what?
It didn't take me 18 years to leave, Charlie. It took 18 years for me to make up my mind I wasn't doing it anymore.
Good.
You have to make up your mind, regardless of how many times. The statistics tell us that it's 7 times.
Did you think you were doing something wrong?
You basically, a lot of people own it because they think they can fix it, especially if somebody's always telling you it's you. That's the emotional part, an abusive part, and the verbal part of domestic violence. So you become conditioned to think that. And when that happens to you enough, you start to believe it. And that's what happens. It does affect you physically and mentally, but the mental part is the part that you have to overcome and even recognize it before you say, I'm not doing it anymore.
Sarah, let me get you, because you're counseling again on this 7 times. That's amazing. And your story is incredible. But how do you counsel? Maybe they should separate. I don't know, how do you do it?
You support. You can't tell somebody what to do and when to do it, but what you can do is be there to walk it with them. And a lot of people are just far too afraid to come forward, to talk to somebody, to say something. There's a lot of women that we work with that are in situations right now that aren't ready to make that choice to leave, but they need an advocate, they need a partner, like an outside force, to just help them with a little guidance. Just
But what
to
are the
be that
options? What are
support.
the options, though? I mean, if nothing, financial. I mean, I can't make it on my own. It's money. I need my spouse, even though
Yeah.
she's no good. I need the money.
Yeah, that's what we do. What I do a lot with the people that I work with is helping them create a plan. How is life going to look? If somebody just leaves with $5 in their pocket and a couple little ones in tow, they're going to go right back because fear brings you back. You don't feel like you can stand on your own 2 feet. But with time and with help from other people and knowing that there's support to help you make a plan to leave, you're much more successful when you do.
Chief Cooper, what is you see this? You must have repeat calls, I guess.
All the time. And one of the challenges that we face and that we see when you talk about a domestic violence situation is one of the problems that you see when you talk about a domestic violence situation is the offender will a lot of times they'll talk and they'll sweet talk the victim, and I'm not going to do it again, and I'm sorry, and we can work through this, and they may get some super, I don't know, for lack of a better word, superficial counseling, and next thing you know, everything's good for a period of time, and then before you know it, we're back out at the scene again. And I've seen this over and over and over and over again. And unfortunately, I've seen it to the point where, like I said, the outcome is tragic to the point of death. And it happens more than you would like to probably imagine.
Judge.
I wanted to chime in on this too. I can think of at least one case, and I remember the defendant's name, and it's from the city of Southfield, and this gentleman was accused of domestic violence at least 6 times, if I can think of. Every time we got to trial, the complaining witness, the alleged victim, never appeared. She just never came. So the case kept getting dismissed. He would get a different case, not even the rewrite of the same first case, a different case with her. It would get written, she would never come. This happened over and over again to the point I knew this man. And eventually, one day, another case was written and she showed up. It was shocking. It was at least almost 7 times before she came to court. She testified, she was very believable, and he was convicted. But other than that, it would have never happened. And the number one thing I always hear in the middle of the case, before it's been adjudicated, is, can we have contact? I'd like to lift the no contact because he's paying the bills, and I need someone to take care of the kids. All of these are common everyday factors that we don't think about, that the victims are concerned about, and they can't move forward because they don't have the child care, and they don't have the money, and they don't have the resources, so they come to us to ask us to let them go home. I personally don't do it for financial reasons, though.
Let me get Chief White. Again, you've heard some of these stories about people. You pick them up. You know there's an abusive relationship. But the woman, or the man, but the woman says, don't arrest me, I need him. Just send him give him a lesson, slap him on the wrist a little bit, whatever. What do you say to either person?
You know, that's what the problem with domestic violence is. A lot of the resources are weaponized against the victim. You know, being able to provide for the children, being able to have a home, a roof over your head. And then ultimately, the spouse that's being victimized wants what's best for the child. And oftentimes children are involved. And then you've got the perpetrator who is convincing them that they're in some way are part of the problem that's leading to the violence. So the whole cycle of violence is happening over and over and over with them, to them, and with the process that they're engaged in. So the best thing that we have found is to bring in a third party that's not the police, a professional counselor, a social worker, or a victim's advocate that can stabilize the situation where the person isn't seeing the police and necessarily being treated as if, you know, you're going to cause this person to go to jail. No, you're not causing them to go to jail. They're causing them to go to jail. And when you bring in that third person that can stabilize the situation, talk from a professional lens, not from a law enforcement lens, we found that to be very beneficial.
Do you bring that person right to the house?
Well, we have them, after we make the arrest, we have the victim's advocate contact the victim and set up the services, get them to court, and give them the resources like the judge talked about and others that can cause them to prosecute, make them feel comfortable about their decision to prosecute. But even with that, the prosecution isn't what we would hope it to be.
While you are all here, your loved ones, understanding what the signs are, and then encouraging them to go through that process so they can be brought before a judge and given either jail time or some type of training through the Heal the Will program. So that is what we need from you, Mr. Keith. Get involved, encourage that victim to go through the process so we can aid them. Thank you.
Let me get another question here, okay? All right, go ahead.
Denise Robinson. Most of the time, we are being challenged because we are not feel that we are enough. And that's the first thing that you have to do. If you know that you are enough, nobody can infringe all the things that they do. So I'd like to thank everyone here and challenge each woman, each man to say, I am enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Come here. Question. Go ahead.
Thank you all for having this forum. My name is Linda Gardner. I started an organization, nonprofit, it's called Jerry's World. That was my brother, and he died from domestic violence 10 years ago.
Brother died?
And first we was all in denial, like, that don't happen to men. How could this happen? But so I just started doing some research, and I noticed they don't have surveys for men, so I made my own survey. I found out that men are sexually abused, they're mentally, emotionally, financially abused. Most of the times, if the man can't read or write very well, the woman or their spouse, or whatever the case may be, will take full advantage of them. They'll end up with their car, their house, material things, whatever, their insurance policy. It goes on and on. So domestic violence is not like, oh, I'm just going to leave today, because it's a lot involved. Like I said, I did a class and I hand out the little certificates for the men. They're so proud because I give them information that they could carry on.
Did your, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but your brother, who is a victim, was there an arrest made?
No. I just decided we'll take our energy and just kind of inform the people like they're doing now and kind of just find out who else is going through it and see if we can come up with a solution. We've been going through this for like 40 years with Al Green, so it's like, it's really time for us to really try to, come up with a solution, and I'm there for it.
Thank you. Let me go back. Hold on. Come here. Stand up. Here we go. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Diane, and my question to the panel, I think the chief just answered my question. I was wondering, how should I approach a person that I know who is a victim? There's a woman in my church, and I know she's a victim. I see the signs because I'm a former victim. But her husband is also a church member, and he's very manipulative. She also has a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old who serve in the church with me. So when I see her, she's always fearful to talk to me. I've tried engaging her in conversation, but her husband always jumps over there to make sure she doesn't talk to anyone but him. So I feel like I should back off, but then I feel like I want to walk that walk with her because I've been there, but I don't know. Should I interfere? Should I back off? I hate seeing her that way because she's really fearful, and I can see the fear on her every time I'm there. But he doesn't let her speak. He always speaks for her. When I ask her a question, he answers. When I approach her, he jumps in. He never lets her speak. So I think the chief might have answered my question. I can walk that walk with her if I'm supposed to do that, if it's okay to do that.
Chief White, can you, if you get a call from a friend who says, my friend is being a victim, what can you do, Chief White?
It's a very, very difficult answer. My recommendation to you is to let her know in every way you can that you're there. I know it's difficult. I'm also a mental health counselor, and I know that it's not as easy as I'm speaking right now. But you have to be able to reach her, even if it's something, find out what her birthday is, do something where you can naturally connect with her, because isolation is one of the biggest weapons perpetrators use against victims, social isolation. So if it's just, hey, happy birthday, let's visit with the kids, do something. And once you, and make it safe to talk to you. Don't solve her problems for her. Just make it safe to talk to you, and you will have a better opportunity to get her the help that she needs.
Chief King, let me just, if you actually witness the violence, and I don't know if this is a hitting situation, if it's emotional, but do you witness it, do you see it? Chief King, she witnesses emotional violence. Is that enough to get you involved?
The emotional violence that you're talking about is just a symptom of the greater issue, the more serious issue. And yes, she can call us. Another aspect, you talked about church. You talked about, what about the religious figure there, the pastor or the reverend or something like that? Maybe using that individual, going and talking to your concerns to them for their parishioner, and them maybe circling back and going, maybe having that aspect to try to separate, because that's what's key. You see it. You're seeing the manipulation, the control, the dominance. You're seeing that individual, that perpetrator is doing that constantly. And that may be an answer for you. I don't know if that's the situation, but that's a recommendation. And always you can contact the police department. We have alternate procedures and tactics to make contact with her. And we can try. We can do some investigative measures to make contact with her. That's an opportunity. And you just gotta constantly be on that, have that awareness and be looking for that opportunity to connect with her and let her know there are those resources out there that we can intervene and try to save her from anything more serious.
Let me ask the counselor, don't yell at me. Don't yell at me. either one of the counselors, or anybody for that matter, do you ever recommend you talk to the husband and say,
Oh, no.
you would never do
No, I would never do that. I had a husband like him. He's not the kind that welcomes interference. I would never do that. It would make her situation worse.
That's good to know. Do you ever, go ahead, Sarah.
It would. You're doing the right thing, though. You're staying by her, and you may be like a life raft to her and not even know it right now, because you're staying and you're not walking away from her, and you're continuing to try. When she's ready, you're going to be the person she reaches out to, and she's going to look to you. She really is.
That was great. Who had a question? I think someone had a question. Oh, yep. Hold on. You also, I think what you're saying is there may be other things going on. We're talking about the abuser now. What do you say? I mean, do we need more treatment? Do we need more awareness for the abuser now? I get the victim, but the abuser, because there may be other issues there. Multiple issues. Do you see that in your practice?
Yes, absolutely. Someone had brought up that when they were talking about, not letting someone get a word in and speaking for the victim and kind of that isolation. We do see that a lot, and sometimes we ask somebody to leave the room so we can speak to the person in private without that other person there. So yes, we do have to sometimes intervene in that way to let them speak for themselves. So that is one way that we see it.
Is there good treatment available for the abuser? I mean, can they be cured?
That's a good question. I don't know if you have any insight on that, but
Aliza.
So when we look at domestic violence and intimate partner violence, it's about power control, right? So, and a lot of people say, okay, well, maybe they can go to couples counseling, maybe they can get help. We don't support couples counseling for domestic violence. It's an issue of power control. And yes, there is counseling out there, and it has to be where that person wants to start and get the help, right? Just like if someone is, addicted to any type of substance use, the first step is that you have to be aware that you need this help.
But go ahead.
Can I add to that? I was in, where you're over there. We were in couples counseling for 1.5 years, and what she was basically doing is saying her version of the story to paint me as the abuser. And so right now, her counselor has written a whole affidavit that I'm the abuser and that she's the victim because of all the stuff that she's been saying to her over and over, and she's very manipulative about that kind of stuff.
But if she was in front of the judge is going to sentence sort of some medical treatment probably as part of the sentence.
I can tell you I was in front of a judge last Monday, and I had actually escaped to Maryland with the children. I was gone for 3 weeks. She had filed so much stuff that when I went in front of the judge would not let me speak. And the judge basically started yelling at me that, how dare you take them out of the state, you need to bring them back. And I'm not in the house right now. I'm at a secret location. This is the first time I've seen my kids in 4 days. So the judge really is completely doesn't know what's actually going on.
But that's a family law judge, okay? And so that's a different issue. If she were to be actually prosecuted and convicted, then she'd be before a sentencing judge. And the sentencing judge would do just what Charlie said, would provide some kind of services to try to redeem her. And it's possible. I'll tell you what we do here. In Southfield, we use something called the HEAL program or the WEAVE program, and we just brought on a new program that's very similar. And these programs are accountability type of programs. The HEAL program is a 52-week program for men. We sentence people to, that's almost like a 6 months worth or more of classes, but they're just not classes. These are sessions that are run by men And the men are in different phases of the program. So some are in denial, they don't want to be there, they just came in there. Others have gone through the phases of the program and come back to the court and tell us how much they've gotten out of it, how much they've learned about themselves. They have homework that they have to do for the 52 weeks.
Judge.
They have to graduate.
Judge, real quick, what's your success rate on that program? Do you ever see those people back in your courtroom?
I don't know that I've got actual stats on the graduates and how many people have been recidivists, but I think it's very successful because we do keep track of each individual as they come through. And most of the people say they've learned a lot of ways to prevent the problems, and they've learned a lot about themselves and accountability. If I can tell you a little bit about what the program does, you'll see how it's a little bit different than most of the programs out there. It's just not a simple sit-in program. The program involves 4 different specific graduation levels that you have to graduate from. Acknowledgement talks about what specific behaviors that person did that gave them a reason for being in the program. They have to acknowledge it. So it's hard for the men to even talk about it and to realize that they did something wrong. There are other men in the program that make them be accountable. So they come to an idea of that they have done something. Then they have to go to the cornerstones, where they explore the models, the power and control wheel, and an accountability plan. Then they go to challenge, which is exploration of core beliefs that allowed them to choose their abusive behavior and identifying alternative accountable options. Then they go to Sankofa, which is the last phase, looking back in order to move forward towards an accountable, nonviolent lifestyle. So it's a real different way of dealing with the domestic violence.
Judge, I don't know who's paying for this program, but I think you've got the mayor of Southfield here, and I'm sure that he would love to hear more about this program and fund this program so we can stop these domestic violence. Right, Mayor? I think I see. There we go. Just got some money for your program, Judge.
All righty.
All right, let me get a new question here. We're gonna get to everybody. I'm gonna go way over there. I'm gonna get you first. Chief Cooper, come, stand up. It doesn't matter who it is. It could be a police officer. It could be another whatever. It doesn't matter who it is, does it?
That's correct. It shouldn't matter. It doesn't matter. Police officer, doctor, lawyer, trash man, whatever it is. You commit the offense, then you should be held accountable 100%.
Okay, question.
I'm a retired police officer, and she took the fire out of what I wanted to ask. How does the police department handle domestic situation such as she said? I do know that Officer Richardson, unfortunately, he was a police officer in Detroit, and he killed his wife, tied her up. It was very bad. But he had a mental issue in which I didn't even know, and I work with him. So is there a way that the department can make some kind of determination? Somebody come and let you know? How can somebody let you know in the process? Thank you.
Thank you. Chief King? So, a month after I became chief of police in Farmington Hills, January 20 of 20, a female officer, very quality, high character officer came into my office and said, I have to resign. I can't be a police officer anymore. And I tried to pressure her because I didn't want to lose her. I talked to her, talk to me, is there something going on? Let me help you. She said, I'm not strong enough at this point. Maybe one day I will be. And she resigned. About a week and a half later, she called me and she said, I need to come in and talk to you. She came in, sat down in my office, she talked to me. She was involved in a relationship with another male officer of my department who was married in another city, and she was suffering through significant mental, physical abuse by this man, to the point where this officer, in a rage one night, pulled his firearm out and discharged his firearm at her face, striking the backsplash of her
kitchen. It was not reported, and when I talked to her and started trying to get the information, she said she didn't trust the police department she worked in or to where she lived in, but she trusted us, and she came and talked to us. Based on what she said, I contacted the police department that was over in Macomb County where she lived, and we immediately coordinated arresting that officer when he stepped foot in our building that day. And that is how we as law enforcement officers have got to respond. It doesn't matter if you wear blue or red or brown or green or anything. You are a criminal abuser of another individual, and you know what? You don't have a right to wear that badge or that patch any longer. You don't protect, you take an oath to protect people, and not only will you be prosecuted, but you will lose your job.
Chief White, how do you handle that in Detroit if there's an alleged bad cop?
Well, we had a situation recently that happened here in Southfield. Chief Barren called me. He made sure that those reports were completed. Upon completion of those reports and his urgence to get those reports to my office, that officer, who happened to be a supervisor, was suspended. He is currently suspended without pay. Once the case is adjudicated in our department through our disciplinary process, he'll be facing some very serious charges that will likely mean that he will not be a police officer any longer.
For any department?
For any department.
New question.
Okay, my name is Barbara Selden, and I live here in Southfield. But my question, I think, is a little bit different because the result of an abused person. And I'm wondering what we will do, particularly in our school systems where we find the bullies, and especially where we know that the children are being abused in their homes. They grow up to be abusers. My mother used to say, a person, if you live in violence, you learn to be violent. And so oftentimes in the homes, children are being abused and they grow up to learn to do violent kind of things. Now, I am the kind of person who really believe that, particularly in the African American community where we do a lot of whooping, if you will, for allowing me to use that word, I really believe that is an act of violence. And one of the things that I feel is that we need to start from the beginning before it gets to that abuse position and stop the parents from abusing the child so they won't learn to be abusers. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Eliza.
Yes, I would like to speak on that because there's great important points that you made. So before I got to Jewish Family Service, I used to work as a general education at-risk school social worker for Oak Park School District in the middle school. And so what we saw is that we saw a need to bring in, to tackle issues related to our youth, right? And the biggest thing that we saw are issues related to healthy relationships. And we see that the children would come from situations of abuse where they felt like it was normalized, right? And it becomes a cycle, a generational cycle that we see from time to time. And so how I was working with the children is that I would bring in Haven to talk about healthy relationships, and I would make it was mandated actually. They had to go into the classrooms, and Haven went into the classrooms and spoke with the kids, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and we did it on a rotation basis so that they learned what a healthy relationship looked like. And I feel like we need to continue doing that and making sure that we continue this conversation, not just for October, for Domestic Violence Awareness Month, but it needs to be daily, weekly, monthly. It needs to be a continued conversation we have moving forward.
Margaret, could I follow up? Do you know the history of your abuser? Was he abused as a child?
As an educator, I had a friend who did research. She went into the prison system, and one of the things that she found out that the majority of the prisoners had been abused as children. Something interesting to know. And so we know that we need to start early so it doesn't get to this point where we now have to solve domestic violence.
I think that's a great point. That's an amazing. Margaret, do you know the history of your abuser? Was he abused?
I do. I won't say that he was I won't say he was abused. I would say that he had issues with speech, and he was very disfluent as a child. And his parents did not know what to do about it, so he was ridiculed a lot, which could be a form of
Bullying?
verbal abuse.
Verbal abuse. Bullying.
Because when you know better, you do better. And depending on how you were raised and what the expectation was and how the parents did, I mean, we know this fluency now. We don't call it stuttering anymore. But I knew that about him. But I don't think sometimes people who are abused were abused. Sometimes it's not even in their history. And it's not even in their DNA. Domestic violence abuse is a learned behavior, and you have a choice to do it or not, because you know the difference between right and wrong. And I don't think anybody wakes up one morning and says, I want somebody to beat me. I want somebody to be disrespectful to me verbally, abusively. And let's not forget about the financial abuse. And we were talking about that earlier as to why people don't leave. It's because they're stuck. And there aren't services. There aren't places they can go. And you're living in your life, so what happens to you then if you have children? It's a lot to give up, especially when there's nothing there for you to go to. So you think where you are is better than what you don't know, and you stay there. And that goes for men as well as women. So financial abuse has to be talked about, because that is a big reason why people don't leave.
Notice an influx in statistics, maybe role reversal of change where women commit domestic violence on men and men are not reporting it, so therefore it's underreported, so the statistics are skewed?
Great question. Great question.
I think that Wakwas is a survivor who came out of my group. I've known him over 10 years. At one time, I had 4 men who were going through the same thing, professionals, doctors, who were all married to alpha women, the controlling ones, who were just as educated, making good money, who they decided that, you know, they were going to take over the relationship. And it was about power and control. At the end of the day, it is. So I think sometimes men feel that they can't report it because this society doesn't welcome that. They frown upon it. Even in different ethnicities, you are not supposed to let the women lead. You're supposed to be the leader. It's hogwash. At the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I think that's where we have to start. We all feel pain. We all bleed the same. So we have to change our conversations about why you should report it regardless of who you are.
I actually had a child with this man, so she's like 34, 35, forgive me, I forgot how old those daughters. But I want to say that I think, and I want to speak to a lot of the younger women, that it comes to a self-esteem issue, that if you feel like this guy is so cute and you don't feel you're that attractive, that he's giving you something that you can't get, because my abuser, he was considered to be very attractive, and in high school I wasn't that attractive. And so, I wasn't. So he was able to come in and say, oh, you know, you're nothing. And it started off insidiously, but then it became abusive. Like, I have a scar on my head from having stitches. And, you know, the mental scars are a lot too. But I'm gonna tell you, when I got heard on the radio, this pastor, and he said, you know what? If a man hits you, he doesn't love you, he doesn't even like you. Because if he liked you, he wouldn't hit you. And it gave me the strength to leave. So I left and went to New York and went to medical school and walked away. I mean, it was the hardest thing I ever did in my life, because I had to leave my daughter with my mother, but I had to do what I had to do. So just to any young ladies, it has to be, you gotta think better of yourself. If a man hits you, he does not like you, he does not love you, because you're not gonna hit people that you like. And I have a daughter here, that's why I want her to come. And just if one of you can talk about how insidious, she'll be dating soon, how they come off, they gaslight you and everything. Can you speak to that, how, so she can see what can happen too? So I just wanted to say
Grooming.
Thank you.
Grooming.
Margaret?
Yes.
Grooming, gaslighting, what is all that about?
So grooming is when they take the person who is their object and they mold them into what they want them to be, and they're kind, and they give them trinkets, and they talk to them a certain way. It's never the monster thing. It's the Prince Charming thing, where they make them feel like they're a queen and that they are the best thing that ever happened to them, and they're able to isolate them. It is basically what happens in domestic violence over and over again, even to people who are not her age and older. And that way they get them under a spell, and then basically you pretty much forget about what's over here and you're more over here with him. Then today, because we have cell phones, we see young people basically attached to that, and that's how they communicate and talk, and that's how they have their own private language and codes, and that's their own private world. So, right now it's hard for young girls and young men to basically understand that technology today has become a weapon of choice, and it's hard to separate that because they're attached to it, and that's their lifeline to being popular or not.
All right, new question.
This is probably for Judge Johnson. If emotional abuse is considered a form of domestic violence, does the courts look at emotional abuse as domestic violence? Is it hard to prove in court?
Okay, that's a great question.
That's a great question.
We were just talking about that a little bit earlier this evening between Ms. Hall and myself, is that all of the emotional abuse that goes with domestic violence is not the legal definition of domestic violence. We all know it is a part of the preying that these abusers do, but it's technically not a part of the domestic violence statute, which just requires somebody to be in a personal relationship or living in the same household or have a child together, and that the one person commits an assault or does something to reasonably put the other person in fear of a battery, which is an unwanted touching of the other person. It doesn't even cover the mental abuse. So you're not going to likely see a lot of cases charged with simply just the emotional side of it, even though that's abuse. You're going to see more cases charged when there's been an actual assault or putting of someone in fear of an actual battery or unwanted touching. Now, once we get the case and we know that there's emotional issues going on, then we can put the person in the mental health counseling and do a lot of things that deal with the emotional abuse that they're doing. But you're not likely to see a charge arise simply from just emotional abuse.
Let me just get one of our counselors. Do you think that domestic abuse, is it more emotional or physical? Or is in every physical, is there also emotional?
It could be both. I mean, we see emotional, we see physical, we see financial, we see, all types of forms of domestic violence. So, I would say maybe this question is for the chiefs. I may probably see more physical, but yet again, I see more emotional because I deal with it on a different level.
Chief Barren, emotional abuse?
Well, they come hand in hand. So generally where there's physical abuse, there's also emotional abuse occurring at the same time.
But I think we understand physical abuse. It's a little easier to understand. What about just emotional abuse? Chief Barren, you get a call, 911, he's been abusing me. Maybe took my money, whatever. What, can you arrest someone then?
So as Chief Judge mentioned, right now there is no laws generated to allow a police officer to arrest simply for that cause. So that's something, and that's why we're here, Charlie. That's why we're here, to get the people who make these decisions, these legislators, to get involved in making these laws so we can affect this issue.
I thank you for bringing that up. That's a great question.
Charlie, can I add something else to it too? Now,
Judge.
there are other kinds of emotional abuse that would come under the umbrella of emotional abuse, but they're charges for, such as stalking. If somebody's stalking you, now obviously that's a criminal charge, but it's an emotional aspect to it too. And domestic violence does not need to have an actual injury, but it does need to have some component of a threat to assault or a threat to have an injury.
But I think as a couple of people are saying, that it's the emotional abuse that is sometimes just as bad as the physical abuse, and there's no law on the books. We need a legislator here. All right, new question. Do you think domestic violence should be taught in school?
I'm sorry?
Do you think domestic violence, what we're talking about here, should be taught in school?
Yes, it should be taught in
What
school.
grade? What grade?
Kindergarten. It should be taught, and the children should learn very, very early about who they are and that they are, and to love one another. Love thyself first. Self-respect is the whole key, and then you can learn to respect other people. So all this is going on. I hear PNG she's on the radio, and everybody's talking about her and the silver wolf, the silver fox. And I think that's disrespectful, is ignorant, because she fell in love with who she fell in love with, and that's none of their business. So the whole key is for all of us to understand that we are human first, we're not animals, and God gave us a brain to think and be able to discern the differences in good and bad and in evil. So we must understand that there are two entities out here, one of good, one of bad. And so, and trust me, I've sat on the board of an African Center School. We have rites of passage programs for boys and girls. But the whole thing is that culture is, everybody has a culture. And we must love who we are in our cultures.
You should run for the legislature someday and change that law. Or the school board,
It's so much.
Thank you. Alicia, do you support, did I mess that name up again? I think I did, sorry.
It's okay, Charlie.
But I'm sorry. But do you think that domestic violence, I mean, what we're talking about today, should be taught in school? And if so, what age?
So I would agree. We started young, right? And that's what I was talking about earlier when we would bring in Haven to talk about healthy relationships. And that's how we framework it, right? And we started social emotional learning right at kindergarten. And we implement that with the teachers, and they implement that with the students.
Go on. How are you? 15 seconds. Dr. Bashweda, wrap up what you want this group to know. 15 seconds. Go ahead.
So, you know, if
nice and loud.
to reach out for help, you know, look for those lifeboats that you were talking about. When you are asked if you're in the ER and you feel unsafe, please tell us you feel unsafe. We will get you resources, we'll get you help. There is hope, and I think that's an important thing to know, that there's hope. There's hope for emotional healing, physical healing, functional healing, and hopefully people get the help that they need, and reach out and to those people that are there for them.
Chief Cooper.
I'd just like to say that domestic violence is obviously big of a challenge as we thought it was and is, and it's probably even bigger. Never surrender to fight. There are a lot of agencies out here that are offering help. You have to continue to come forward, tell your stories, and seek out that help. As far as the chief sitting up here, I'm sure I can speak for all of us. We are here for you. We will do whatever we can to assist you. And like I said, never surrender to fight.
Aliza,
it's okay. It's okay. So I just want to encourage everyone to continue to have this conversation regarding domestic violence with our leaders, right? That's going to be really important, to continue this conversation daily, weekly, monthly, yearly. Just continue the conversation.
Judge, 15 seconds.
I'd just like to say that if you do speak up and a case is brought, just know that the court system is going to do the best that it can to protect you. We have things in place to keep track of these people, so don't let them stop you from speaking up and ruin your life by keeping you in a shell. We will do our best to protect you and then to get them some resources to rehabilitate them.
Chief King. Not to sound redundant, but your
everyone needs to understand they're not alone in this. No one is alone in this. There are resources out there, people to help you, protect you. It starts off with 911 and the police department to save lives that night, that day. But in the aftermath, there's resources, there's support groups. There are things available for you. Whoever's out there suffering, surviving through this, there are resources out there. There's help. You need to call out, reach us, call us, get us involved. We will help you. We'll get you to the other resources that will help you end this cycle of violence.
Sarah.
I think everything everybody's saying is exactly what I would say. If you see something, if you have a fear that somebody's going through something, if it's not happening to you, don't give up on that person. You may be the only person that sees what's going on for what it is, and everyone needs someone in their corner. So just keep doing that and reach out for help.
Chief White.
I want to thank my fellow chiefs, specifically Chief Barren and Chief King for having the courage to keep this center point, center focus. Yes, give them a big hand. Thank you. Certainly thank PG for her work. And I just want to highlight somebody on our staff, and that was Ms. Stinson, who spoke. She's a victim's advocate as well. And what she said is right on point. You know, we can certainly bring education to the school, but it's important that we bring the right education to the kids, because assimilation, or if you know if it's your life at home, association is going to breed assimilation. If you see it all day at home, you're going to come to school, you're going to engage in the same behavior. And what we see with kids is that there's a lack of impulse control, and it has a lot to do with what they're seeing. So we have to bring the right education. We're here for you. We want to help. We've got programs set up. Don't stop fighting. If you are in the fight, it's a fight for your life, and do everything you can to separate yourself from the situation. Thank you.
Margaret Hall.
Everything that was said tonight, plus more. We have got to stop letting domestic violence kill people. You have got to speak out about it. Don't let it be a secret. You just can't let it do that, because all it's going to do is what? Keep it happening. So we all need to be mandated reporters about it. And I think that we have to stop treating domestic violence like the silent killer that it is. We have to actively get out there and make sure that people don't have to suffer.
Chief Barrett, I'll give you the last word.
Domestic violence calls for service is the most dangerous call that a police department can run to. Understand, a lot of police officers have lost their lives in domestic violence response calls and have many serious injuries. Despite that, we're still coming. So please have the confidence in all these agencies represented here to call 911 if you or your loved one is experiencing a domestic violence episode. Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, everybody.